but having a plan, I have learned in some cases the hard way, is the most, critical thing, because otherwise you don't know what you're setting up.
Check out the big brain on Brad.
Nerderotic.com.
It's old news. It's dead news. It's news we knew already, but it was just somebody coming out and admitting the obvious, and we have to point it out, which is Jar Jar Abrams, the destroyer of franchises, admitting failure.
Man, he's short.
Yes, he really is.
They couldn't have given him a box to stand on?
He's used up all the boxes as mystery boxes in his film. So
before we get into this article, we have to talk about, how did we get here? What was our journey? Let's sound pretentious as possible. The wokeness bleeding in, I noticed it in comic books early 2000s. Wasn't bad, but it was there. Greg Rucka was probably the worst of the worst at the time in Wonder Woman comics, especially. Of course, we had Gamergate. Zoe Quinn was sleeping with 5 guys and getting good reviews, but there was also all the wokeness creeping into games. Of course, it was creeping into Hollywood. I don't think we're actually at peak woke. I think we still have a little ways to go, but we're starting to see Hollywood recognize that they might have gone a little too far. They might have whiffed a little bit of too many of their own farts. This is the same Jar Jar Abrams last year who, during the frenzy of the fucking rioting, which was actual rioting, which caused actual death and actual damage to a lot of actual businesses, they were rooting that shit on, including the no more white comfort statement, which we should never, ever let them forget. That was a Marxist statement. That was a no more middle class comfort statement. That was directed at the middle class, not just white people. So we have Jar Jar come out and admit that maybe he needed a plan for Star Wars. The guy who didn't put Han, Luke, and Leia in a scene together, the single biggest mistake in cinematic history, the dumbest fucking move in cinematic history. He made The Force Awakens clickbait. So now, why do you think he decided to come out and say this? Because Jar Jar doesn't do anything that isn't planned.
Well, he's a politician. I believe he's just an easy tool for the powers that be to put out there because he knows how to talk. He knows how to bring normies in. He knows how to be a politician and come off as this nice, genuine guy. I just think he's a person that's being controlled by other people. The mask has finally started to slip off, especially with his bad robot stuff, the message they put out about white comfort and all that shit. And it's because Steven Spielberg initially propped him up. Before all these identity politics, Steven Spielberg co-signed him. He is a person that I don't believe he has an original thought of his own. I believe that he will go with whatever the Hollywood structure wants him to. They manipulate him like a puppet. And he's good at making everyone else think that he's this genuinely nice guy. And he's good at being a politician. For his reasoning for this, I think that he finally has realized that the backlash is so bad off the sequel trilogy that he's continuing to try to stay ahead of it so that his name doesn't continue to get drugged down into the mud.
The idea that J.J. Abrams is finally fucking coming to the realization that he needs a plan. Maybe you should have thought about that with Lost. Maybe you should have thought about that with Fringe. Maybe you should have thought about that with every single fucking major project he's worked on. There is never really a plan. It's paint as you go, and then you get to the fucking end of the page, and you have no idea what you're going to do.
I think what he does plan on doing is grabbing power. His wife is behind the whole Me Too Time's Up movement. He got $500 million from the very stupid Warner Brothers, and it's based on the bottom line. I mean, you got to understand that part, too, is like the films he was involved with made a lot of fucking money, and the bankers that run shit don't really look at things like plot because they don't watch these movies. They don't understand fandoms, and they don't give a shit. I have little doubt that he knows the questions before he's asked. So here it is.
He looks like he just woke up all the time.
He does.
You plan things in a certain way, and you suddenly find yourself doing something that's 180 degrees different. And then sometimes it works really well, and you feel like, wow, that really came together. And other times you think, oh my God, I can't believe this is where we are. And sometimes when it's not working out, it's because it's what you planned. And other times when it's not working out, it's because it didn't. It's like you never really know. But having a plan, I have learned in some cases the hard way, is the most critical thing, because otherwise you don't know what you're setting up. You don't know what you're what to emphasize, because if you don't know the inevitable of the story, you're just as good as your last, sequence or effect or joke or whatever, but you want to be leading to something inevitable.
So he's just saying he sucks?
Basically, yeah.
Well, yeah, because you're talking about a guy here who's been given charge of what should have been the biggest trilogy ever created when it came out, and The Force Awakens started that ball rolling when 2.4 billion at the box office. And even then, back then though, he said we don't have a plan. a new director's going to come in, and they're going to pick up the threads from where the other films left off, and they're going to run with that.
He did have an outline for 8, but they just didn't go with it, right?
Cliff notes. This thing should have had a cast iron fucking direction for the trilogy.
Well, it did.
Never
It
mind
did.
for one
It did.
fucking
George
film.
Lucas handed it to him, and they fucking ignored it.
We were saying this shit forever. So was everybody else. I'm not saying we came up with it. You know, it was pretty obvious they didn't have a plan. And for the longest time, they were discrediting fans. They decided to, instead of acknowledging this, discredit fans to the point of calling them Russian bots. And we know the story. We've all done videos on it. And now he comes out, you know, after Daisy Ridley has said it.
At the beginning, there was toying with like an Obi-Wan connection, and then it really went, there were like different versions, and then it really went to that she was no one. And then it came to episode 9, and JJ pitched me the film and was like, oh yeah, Palpatine's granddaddy. And I was like, awesome. And then 2 weeks later, he was like, oh, we're not sure. So it kept changing.
So again, we all knew it, but for him to come out and say it, and you know, yes, we were fucking right the whole fucking time after you called us a Nazi and a white supremacist and all this shit, just because we said we didn't like your movie. And this is the path that Disney has decided to take over and over again. And believe me, they're going to take this path with the MCU over the next year as well, knowing they have complete shit on their hands. And the best thing they could do to protect their complete shit is to discredit potential customers. I hope that time has come. We'll find out. We keep on hearing about records for this and that. What the fuck ever. It doesn't matter. When we were talking about this stuff, we were always talking about more than Star Wars, right? This was never just about Star Wars. This was about, man, we're seeing this in Star Wars, which means we're seeing it in the news. We're seeing it in every TV show. And now we are seeing it everywhere. We tried to stop this stuff before by calling it out, and nobody was listening.
That's how it goes. Like when you start speaking the truth they don't want you to speak about, they paint you with this brush like, oh, you're racist, you're sexist, you're misogynistic, you hate women, you hate minorities, just because you say that there wasn't a plan for the sequel trilogy. No, we just have working brains and we watched what's right in front of us. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. It just means that they clearly didn't have a fucking plan and they're pushing identity politics. But when you said that, you were called all these names. Now, JJ says it, you know, they could have probably done better. That's the answer now. They probably could have done better, but they did as good as they could have. Like when we said it, we were called racist and sexist. And it's just a thing that we are constantly seeing. Speaking the truth, speaking against the narrative, it gets you a lot of resistance. And then 6, 8, 10 months later, your same points are being accepted because they tried to temper down that controversy at first. And then it circles back around. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but they'll never apologize. It's so similar with like certain truths in politics. Like it's everybody forgets. Like they're not going to say, oh, maybe Trump was right about XYZ. Maybe the fans were right about XYZ. They'll never apologize, which is infuriating.
If you like what I do here, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking and sharing the videos. It really does help. And if you did this with your favorite YouTuber as well, I'm sure they would appreciate it as much as I do.